this was a question that was sent in. There was a case of a woman who, since she had no uterus, but she got married anyway.
She had no what? Uterus, yeah.
And she ended up having a child, but it was through like a transplant. So and the question is going to be regarding marriage. How was it allowed for her to get married if, let's say the husband never had any children? Was it mutter for the husband to marry her, knowing that she's not able to have children?
Well, okay, so these are two totally different questions. They're not even related. Let's take the second question first, which is a more straightforward question. That is, there is a mitzvah in the Torah called urevu. There's a mitzvah to have children, if you're able to have children. And this mitzvah is only on the man, it is not on the woman, but a man is obligated to marry a woman that at least is able to have children, because the man has a chiyuv of urevu. So in the abstract, if you ask me the question, is a man allowed to marry a woman who is not capable of having children? The short answer is, unless he has already fulfilled urevu by a son and a daughter, he is not allowed to marry such a woman, which means, obviously, he shouldn't date a woman if he's given that information. Now, do we apply that absolutely? I mean, let's take a simple example of an older bachelor who has not found a shidduch. He's already 50 years old. So he says, I have to marry a girl that's below 40 because after 40, the chances of having a child are much less. At some point, we basically say, listen, a 50-year-old person is not going to get usually a 22-year-old kala. So at that point, better to marry and not have children than not to get married. Okay, but those are exceptions. But as a general rule, a man who is capable of having children is not allowed to marry a woman that's not capable of having children. So as a result, if I was not Makayim urevu, and I know that this woman doesn't have a uterus, I would not be allowed to marry her. Now, the only question is this. If we have developed a scientific technology, such as a uterine transplant, I'm not sure if there is such a thing yet, but theoretically there might be. So it turns out, just because she doesn't have a uterus, that doesn't mean she can't have children. She can have children through the surgical procedure. So if indeed she could have children via the surgical procedure, then even if she hasn't had the surgery yet, I would be allowed to marry her on the smach that she would go through the procedure. But I would have to know that she would be willing to go through the procedure. Otherwise, there would be a problem. I'm not sure. I know that for many, many years, the medical community has spoken about the possibility of a uterine transplant. I'm not sure if we actually have done that yet. But that would be the short answer. The short answer is a man who is capable, who at least believes he is capable of having children, is not allowed halachically to marry a woman who cannot have children unless the man was already makayim from an earlier marriage, the mitzvah of urevu, by having a son and a daughter. Okay? Yeah.
Is there a problem to wear slides or crocs for davening?
To wear what?
Slides, crocs.
Yeah. So the question is there a problem of wearing what you might call informal footwear to davening? Is it called respectful? So there's not intrinsically a problem. I mean, the issue basically is that when one davens to Hashem, one should dress in the same dignified way that they would appear in front of a melech or in front of a president or the like. Now that lamaisa changes with societal standards, meaning in more relaxed societies, where somebody might appear in flip-flops or sandals or crocs or slides or whatever you call it, then halachically it would be permitted. If, however, you would not wear such a levush, had you had a meeting with an important officer, then you should not wear it during davening. The same thing for being barefoot. Me'ikar adin, there is no problem in davening barefoot, and in point of fact, in the Bet HaMikdash, you were mechuyev to go barefoot. You weren't allowed to wear any shoes. And when Moshe Rabbeinu is in front of the burning bush, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, take off your shoes, you're standing b'makom kadesh. So being barefoot is not intrinsically anything deficient in avodas Hashem. It may even have a certain madrega, but the problem once again is, if you would not go b'fnei hamelech in that type of levush, it is not covered for Hashem to do that. So that would be the short answer to that. Now I know, just as a little aside, Rabbi Yashiv discusses, it's not at all the same question, but it's a little peripherally related. We know on Yom Kippur, you're not supposed to wear leather shoes, right? Tisha B'Av Yom Kippur, you're supposed to wear ne'ilas sandal. So the question is, can you wear crocs on Yom Kippur? So Rabbi Yashiv had this far, you can't, because the whole idea of ne'ilas sandal is it's supposed to be uncomfortable for you. You're supposed to move to something that's less comfortable than leather shoes. Meaning, those types of things that are more comfortable, Rabbi Yashiv has the chatchila at least, is not a kiyum of ne'ilas sandal on Yom Kippur. Now, if you took that svara to its extreme, that would go way, way beyond not wearing Crocs. I mean, basically, almost all of the non-leather shoes that people wear are usually a lot more comfortable than leather shoes. So I don't think Rabbi Yashiv's chumrah was makubal in halacha, but this is what he said. He said that there has to be an element of tsar in the ilas sandal. Yeah.
How is it possible there's so much machloket on the exact times of korbanos right after the korban of the
How come there is so much machloket about the exact times of korbanos? Like, what do you mean by the times of korbanos?
They were doing it every day, the times of beginning and ending of the korbanos.
Yes.
And they, one generation later, or not even, they're already unsure of what time they were doing korbanos.
Oh, in terms of the times of the daily offering. Yeah, so the short answer is that, well, I'll give you two answers. One answer actually is that the Talmud Yerushalmi says that the Churban Bet HaMikdash was such a cataclysmic event. It was such a tragic event that people got discombobulated. They were forgetting all sorts of things. In fact, they even forgot the dating of the 17th of Tammuz. They thought it was the 9th of Tammuz. So there is a notion that trauma can erase memory. The other answer could be that when you have a machlokas about later, it could be that in the time of the Bet HaMikdash itself, there were different rabbis who were paskening at different times. So some recollected it to be this time, some recollected it to be this time, because in point of fact, there were different traditions. Meaning it was not one time for all of the 420 years. It depends on who the rabbi of the day was. So as a result, it's not that this was a new machlokas that was created later, but it was a machlokas that actually existed all the way back. So those would be two approaches to that issue. Yeah.
So during havdallah, no matter the type of spices, I think Ashkenaz always says borei vesamim. The question is why, and another question was if the Sephardi's making havdallah, usually I guess the spices we have the issue are really atzeh, but we still say minhag. If a Sephardi says atzeh vesamim, would a Ashkenaz be yotzi with that bracha?
Yeah. So this is the general concept of we're all familiar very much with the brachos that we say on food. We make brachos on food, but there's also brachos that you say on smells, on pleasant fragrances. And this is not only havdallah, even during the week. If you were to take vesamim, there are brachos. And there are actually several different types. If it comes from like a tree, it's atzei vesamim. If it's just plant, it's mine besamim. If it's a grass, it's isve besamim. So mine besamim is the generic bracha that covers everything, at least b'di'evet. So if you're not sure exactly where certain besamim originate, is it a grass? Is it a tree? So mine besamim is going to be good. So Ashkenazim, or the minhag of Ashkenazim tended to be fairly mekel, or at least generic in havdallah, to always make mine besamim, because we don't really know where all of this comes from. Maybe Sephardim were closer to nature, I don't know, and they would say if it comes from a tree, it's atzei besamim, etc. So the issue is this. I mean, the issue is it's a davar pashut that everybody is yotzei with every variation. So a Sephardi is certainly yotzei with mine besamim, because that's always the case. And if atzei besamim is the correct bracha for that spice, and the Sephardi is making it, an Ashkenazi is for sure going to be yotzei, because the chatchila, it's better to have the more specific bracha. So that would not be the issue. Now, just as a general rule, let me just point out, I'm sure you all know this, the reason why we make a bracha on spices at the end of Shabbos is simply because it is said, Chazal tell us, that when Shabbos comes in, we get an extra soul, an extra ability to comprehend the Shekhinah, Ruchnius, an enhanced spiritual ability. And at the end of Shabbos, that neshama yesera leaves us. And when it leaves us, we feel faint, we feel weak, we feel disillusioned in some ways. We feel sad, as we rightly should feel. And as a result, the vesamim is there to revive you and make up for the neshama yesera. So this raises an interesting question, and that is, when you make havdallah after Yom Tov, meaning not after Shabbos, after Yom Tov, do you make a borei minei vesamim? So the short answer is you do not. We only make a borei minei vesamim when it is Motzei Shabbos, and not when it's Motzei Yom Tov. Now, many Rishonim give the reason that you only get a neshama yesera on Shabbos, you don't get a neshama yesera on Yom Tov, and therefore you're not losing the neshama yesera, and therefore you don't make vesamim. But there's a kasha on that sheet, and that's going to be Nogeya this year. This year, we're going to be going from Shabbos on the first day of Rosh Hashanah to Yom Tov, right? Shabbos, and then Motzei Shabbos. So what do you do when you go from Shabbos to Yom Tov? Because remember, Shabbos requires a havdallah, Yom Tov requires a kiddush. So there's actually an acronym that tells you exactly what to do. This is one of those acronyms that you should memorize. And the acronym is Yak Nahaz. Yud Kuf Nun Hey Zayin. And it tells you the exact order. Yud, Yayin, Borei Priyagafen. Kuf, Kiddush, which is Mekadesh Yisrael, well, for Rosh Hashanah, Mekadesh Yisrael v'Yom HaZikaron. Ner, Borei Morei Ha'esh. You have to have a candle that you lit before you, that you can make the Borei Morei on it. Then Havdallah, which is not Hamavdol ben Kodesh l'Chol, but it's ben Kodesh l'Kodesh. And the Zayin is Zman, which is Shechiyanu. This is the good combination between Kiddush and Havdallah. Now you'll notice the one thing that's missing is there is no besamim. There is no besamim, right? So it's shver. If I don't make besamim when I leave Yom Tov because there's no neshama yesera, then by that logic I should make besamim when I'm going from Shabbos to Yom Tov because I'm losing the neshama yesera of Shabbos. You see, that's the bimanifshach. If you're telling me I'm not going to make it after Yom Tov because I didn't have a neshama yesera, then that means I lost it when I was going into Yom Tov from Shabbos. So because of this, the Sfas Emes offers a different pshat. The Sfas Emes says, the neshama yesera you do get a neshama yesera on Yom Tov, but you don't lose it. It stays with you forever. Memela, when I go from Shabbos to Yom Tov, I don't need besamim because I have a neshama yesera of Yom Tov. And when I leave Yom Tov, I don't need besamim, not because I didn't have a neshama yesera, but the other way around, the neshama yesera of Yom Tov was never taken away from me. That's what this Sfas Emes says. Okay? Yeah.
Just continuation of this question. Let's say if like an Ashkenaz finds like the spice that we use on havdallah during the week, should they make borei minei vesamim, or should they, if they know it's atzeh, should they also make the bracha atzeh?
They should say atzeh b'samim too, if they know what it's from. Even if for havdallah, the minhag is we have a nusach kavua, but when you're making the individual birkat hareach, you should make the proper one. Now, birkat hareach is a complicated series of halachas that a lot of people don't really learn very well, because there's a lot of things that have very, very pleasant fragrances that are minhag that we don't make a bracha on. An example is freshly brewed coffee, even fruits. And the general rule is that if you're using something to eat or drink, even though it has a very good fragrance, you don't make a birkas reach. Birkas reach is only when something is there for reach and not when it's there for eating, right? So that's why we don't make a bracha on oranges, on apples. On the other hand, if you're not planning on eating an orange, and you pick up the orange with the kavana to enjoy the smell, then einachinami. Then in such a situation, you would actually make a bracha on the orange as well. But things that you eat or drink, you do not make a bracha on.
What about fragrances?
I'm sorry, I don't hear you.
Fragrances that you try out?
I'm sorry, fragrances that you?
Like synthetic ones that you.
Yeah. So that's another important rule. Synthetic fragrances we do not. So most colognes and the like, there is no bracha on them because they are chemical. They are not natural fragrances. We do not make it. Now that also means one should not use it for havdallah, precisely for that very reason.
When should a person start learning Kabbalah?
Yeah, when should a person start learning Kabbalah? So this would depend who you ask. Some people would say never. But here's the thing. The traditional answer has been, but I'm going to qualify that answer, that one should not be osek in Kabbalah until they're at least 40 years old, number one. Number two, they're married. And number three, the language is they have filled their stomach with shas and poskim, which means they are very knowledgeable of basic Gemara and the like, and basic halacha. And only with those three conditions, 40, married, have a very good knowledge of Gemara, then you could be osek in Kabbalah, provided you have the right teachers, the right rebbes, and you try to purify yourself to have proper thought. Now, it's no secret that obviously many people at least dip their toe into Kabbalah at a much earlier age. And there actually is a justification for this, because when we talk about don't learn Kabbalah until, we are talking about some very heavy-duty technical Kabbalah. Now, one of the things the Hasidic movement did was, Hasidus is based on Kabbalah. But Hasidus, in some ways, you could actually call a popularization of Kabbalah. It's kind of taking very deep Kabbalistic ideas and making them more accessible to people. So whether it's via Hasidus or whether it's simply through a Kabbalah light type of thing, it is said that for many, many people, even if they're single, a certain amount of Kabbalah can inspire them, can energize them, can give them a sense of how beautiful the Torah is and how important their avodas Hashem is. So that type of taste of Kabbalah is technically not within the interdiction, meaning the rule that you're not allowed to learn Kabbalah is referring to, let's say, someone who wants to learn the Arizal's writings, the Eitz Chaim. Although we have some Talmidim here who actually went and made a siyum on Eitz Chaim, quite amazing. Okay, without there may be exceptions to every rule, but generally speaking, that's the type of thing we might discourage. But the type of light Kabbalah that you encounter in Hasidus and in Rav Aryeh Kaplan, for example, that is, I think, is perfectly good. And in fact, the Vilna Gaon writes that as we approach the days of Mashiach, the learning of Kabbalah is going to be more and more important, and everybody should be familiar with at least basic Kabbalistic ideas. In fact, you would be surprised how much of regular Orthodox Judaism, just regular from Jew, is actually based on Kabbalah. Kabbalah, taking away all of the terminology, Kabbalah is actually the mainstream philosophy of Judaism. If the Rambam would hear kind of what is taught as the basic hashkafa of Judaism, he would be very, very surprised. It is not the Rambam's Judaism that is being taught. It is not the Judaism of Rav Saadia Gaon. It is essentially the Judaism of the Ramchal, and the Ramchal was first and foremost a Kabbalist. People don't realize that. We know the Ramchal from Mesilas Yesharim, but everything the Ramchal did was deeply, deeply, deeply rooted in the Arizal's writings. The Ramchal wrote many, many books, some of which he destroyed, but there are many books that are still published, and they are Kabbalistic. Mesilas Yesharim is also based on Kabbalah, but the Ramchal was such a genius, he was able to write a Musar Sefer which you wouldn't even know is connected to Kabbalah. But it is. There are editions of Mesilas Yesharim that trace every line to deep Kabbalah. But once you get to Derech Hashem, it's a little more Kabbalistic. And then you get to Das Tavunos, which is a little more Kabbalistic. And it becomes very, very apparent that everything the Ramchal is doing is based on Kabbalah. And the Derech Hashem in the yeshiva world has really become the basic work of Jewish philosophy that is taught. What can I tell you? With great deep apologies to the Rambam, the main sefer of Jewish philosophy is not the Moreh Nevuchim, at least in the yeshiva world. It is 100% Derech Hashem, and Derech Hashem is based on Kabbalistic premises. Now, what exactly would be the difference? That would take a much longer time than we have. But all I'm saying is that Ramchal and those types of things and Hasidus are indirect ways of bringing a lot of Kabbalistic ideas into your life. Even Nefesh HaChaim. Nefesh HaChaim, a pure Litvish Sefer from Rav Chaim Volozhiner, the great Talmud of the Gra. Nefesh HaChaim is a Kabbalistic work. Tanya, which is a great Sefer, even if you're not from Chabad, Tanya is a Kabbalistic work. And some of it is very deep, but it's largely very accessible. Tomer Devorah, one of the great, great, beautiful books of Rav Moshe Cordovero that are often studied during Yom Noraim about perfecting your character and your midos, is a Kabbalistic work. So the idea that no Kabbalah till you're 40 was never meant to be absolutely as literal as people might take it. So in a sense, I could say, if you ask me a question, can you learn any Kabbalah now? The answer is you can, but in more of the light doses of some of Ramchal, Chasidus, Tomer Devorah, Tanya, those types of things. Yeah.
Where does the chiyuv that someone in Geras needs to machal Shabbos come from? And then what's the implication of a borei who doesn't machal Shabbos?
Yeah. So this is based on a Gemara in Sanhedrin that says, it discusses the non-Jew is obligated in the 7 commandments of Noah, but it mentions if a non-Jew keeps Shabbos, he is deserving of death. Now, why is that so? Because Shabbos was given as a gift to the Jewish people. And therefore, if a non-Jew takes that gift, he is stealing it from the Jewish people. And therefore, it's a violation of the Noahide law. So the first thing I have to say is that the Rambam writes beferish in Hilchos Melachim that when it says he's chayav misa, it does not mean that a basin will kill him. This is not a punishment that will be imposed by any human court. But spiritually, he is deserving of death because he misappropriated the precious gift of the Jewish people. Now, because of this, even when a person is converting to Judaism and is planning on being a Jew, they will be instructed. So obviously, they need to practice Shabbos. They need to know what it is. But they will be instructed to violate one malacha, turn on one light, in order that you don't become a Jew, become a non-Jew who keeps a complete Shabbos. So again, we wouldn't advise a candidate for Geras not to keep Shabbos at all because that would be inconsistent with the training period, but he should be Mechal Shabbos once. They have a cute joke about, it might even be a true story, about a non-Jew who was a very, very stark, committed candidate for Geras. He was a masmid, and he was keeping all of the mitzvahs very conscientiously, and some of the regular guys in the yeshiva didn't like it. They thought he was acting too haughty, like he's such a big tzaddik. So they went over to him and they said, this is really not nice, but they said to him, oh, you think you're such a tzaddik? You think you're such a big shot? You're chayav misa because you meticulously keep Shabbos every week, and you're not supposed to do that. So what you think is your righteousness is your sin. So the guy looks up and says, no. I'm mechalel Shabbos every week. I carry in your erev. Okay, so he was saying that you're the guys who are mechalel Shabbos because you rely on your pasal erev, and that's how I fulfill my obligation. Now, I want to tell you a very, very fascinating Pesikta. Pesikta is one of the midrashim of Chazal. We know that in the 10 Commandments appear 2 places in the Torah, one in Parshas Yisro, and then again in Parshas V'eschanan. And the accounts are largely the same, but one of the most significant differences is Shabbos. That in Parshas Yisro, it says, Zochor es Yom HaShabbos l'kadshay. Remember Shabbos to keep it holy. In Parshas V'eschanan, it says, Shamor, observe Shabbos to keep it holy. And we know which did Hashem say, so that's what we say in L'chadodi, Shamor v'zachor b'dibur echad. God said both words simultaneously. Now, what is the difference between Shamor and Zachor? So Shamor is the negative. Do not do the 39 malachos, refrain from malacha. Zachor is the more positive celebration of Shabbos. Kiddush, honoring Shabbos with a meal, etc. So here's what the Pesikta says. Shamar was given only to the Jewish people. But Zachor is given to the whole world. Now, this is a very interesting point, and that is, a non-Jew is not supposed to keep Shabbos. Okay, that's why he has to be Mechalel Shabbos. But does that mean he should regard Saturday as just another day of the week? The Pesikta is telling us no. The Pesikta is saying that even non-Jews who have to believe in God, they should celebrate that Shabbos is the anniversary of God completing the creation of the world. It should be a day of prayer. It should be a day of emunah. It should be a day of celebration, which is very interesting, meaning people sometimes think, since a non-Jew is not supposed to keep Shabbos, that means a non-Jew just ignores Shabbos. The Pesikta is actually saying, no, Shabbos should be a significant day, albeit not with the 39 malachas. And indeed, there was a chashuv Rav in Yerushalayim who was nifter a few years ago, Rav Yoel Schwartz, who was very involved in many things, but one of his interests were the Noachide community, the community of Bnei Noach, and he actually wrote rituals, Shabbos rituals for non-Jews to commemorate God creating the world. You see, if you ask me, should a non-Jew celebrate Pesach or Shavuos, there I think the answer might be no, because these are Jewish experiences. But if you ask me, should a non-Jew celebrate Shabbos, why not? In point of fact, God made the world in 6 days, and He rested on the seventh day. And I was aware of Rav Schwartz, but just very recently I was not aware of the Pesikta. And the Pesikta is a really, really, really strong source for what Rav Schwartz was saying. I'm sorry, did you have a follow-up on that? Yeah.
Does that also apply to Yom Tov, that they need to
It would appear so, yes. It would appear that Shabbos and Yom Tov are the same in that way. In fact, they asked the Kasha, by the way, we have a tradition that the Avos, Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, kept the whole Torah before it was given. So they do ask a Kasha, how could Avraham Avinu, which means even though before Matan Torah we were Noachites, so how could Avraham Avinu keep Shabbos? He could be machmer and everything else. He could be machmer to do this and that. But if he's machmer on Shabbos, he's transgressing the Noachide law not to keep Shabbos. So there are a lot of good answers to this. One of the interesting answers is that Avraham Avinu wore tzitzis. Now here's the chap. Since a Jew has a mitzvah of tzitzis, tzitzis is part of my clothing, so it's not called carrying. But since a goy does not have the mitzvah of tzitzis, then wearing tzitzis is called carrying. So Avraham Avinu covered both of his bases. As a goy, he violated Shabbos because tzitzis are carrying. But as a Jew, he didn't violate Shabbos because tzitzis are not carrying, and therefore he kept Shabbos in his Jewish capacity, and he violated Shabbos in his non-Jewish capacity. And therefore, he was able to have his cake and eat it too. He was both a Mechalel Shabbos as a goy and a Shomer Shabbos as a Jew. That's one of the answers that's given. Now, the emes is, it's interesting. It's not clear to me that a guy has to, or a candidate for Gerus, let's say, has to consciously violate Shabbos. The Mishnah Berurah brings in the introduction to Chelek Gimel. Chelek Gimel of the Mishnah Berurah is Hilchos Shabbos. So he brings from the Yaros Devash, that's Rav Yonas and Eibshitz, that if a Jew is not conversant with Hilchos Shabbos over and over and over again, it is impossible that he will not desecrate Shabbos several times in the course of a Shabbos. It's inevitable. So according to that, even if the guy is not consciously going to violate Shabbos, the assumption is he's going to do it anyway, just as anybody who doesn't know all the halachas of Shabbos. So I'm not sure if he has to consciously turn on a light, but that's generally the instruction that we give. Yeah.
Would it have to be Issa Derais, or could it even be a Rabbanan that he violates?
Oh, in terms of Chilul Shabbos?
Yeah.
That's a good question. I think we're noyeg that it has to be a doraisa, but that's a good point. Maybe a drabanan could suffice for that. Yeah.
But then isn't there machloket to whether the light is derabanan and deraisa?
Oh, turning on the light, electricity, LED. Yeah, that's a very good point. If you have to have a malacha d'oraisa, it is taka not so pashat if electric lights are a malacha d'oraisa. Now, the old-fashioned bulb, which they don't even make anymore, I don't think, the incandescent light bulb, does anyone remember that? It's kind of those are like the cameras with film. They don't have them anymore. So that was considered to be regular fire because an electric current went through a filament of metal. It heated it up. There was heat. There was light. So that was simple enough. That was called making a fire on Shabbos, and that would be called the malacha d'oraisa. But today we have all sorts of different types of lights. We have fluorescent lights. We have LED, which is a very, very common light, and LED does not work through heating a filament. So there's a whole shaila. What is the malacha? The Chazon Ish took the position that every time you close an electric circuit, thereby activating an appliance, that's the malacha, not of fire. It's the malacha of building. So like the Chazon Ish, there would be a malacha d'oraisa, but other poskim, like Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, they took the position that those types of lights were only midrabanan. So you're correct. Maybe doing a light is not good enough. You'd have to think of some other way of being Machal Shabbos. Maybe writing something. You have to write 2 letters and the like. But it's a good horror. Yeah.
Maybe to go back to what we just discussed with the Avot keeping all of Torah and mitzvah. I understand the general concept, but how can it be that they kept, for example, the Yom Tov of Purim, of Pesach? I heard an explanation of the Purim, Shabbat, the eighth,
Yeah. Because the problem you're raising is, you are correct. I could answer you, they only kept the Torah commandments, but the truth is the Gemara says they kept rabbinic commandments as well. So what's going on? Did they keep Purim? Did they keep Tisha B'Av? So number one, okay, so one answer is that it doesn't have to be 100% level, meaning the basic idea that they intuited mitzvahs and they did them, but not every single thing had to be done. But the other answer would be that, once again, they had Ruach HaKodesh, they had Nevuah, they understood everything that would happen to their descendants over the years, and as a result, they could even observe Tisha B'Av because of the Korban that will happen, even though it hasn't happened yet. So I think they could theoretically incorporate everything into their observances. Although I'm not saying that that's necessarily the case, but at least it's a possibility. Yeah.
When they say they knew they kept Torah, does that mean they knew exactly what in the Torah, like what? Because if so, then what like in the stone with Yitzchak, like they knew what was going to happen.
No. So it's very, very pashut. Rav Chaim Volozhiner says this in the Nefesh HaChaim. When it says they kept the Torah before it was given, they did not have a text of the 5 books of Moses. They didn't know, Avram didn't know the story of the Akedah before the story of the Akedah. Rather, Rav Chaim Volozhiner explains that their keeping of the Torah was in the nature of what you would call today reverse engineering from the physical world. What is reverse engineering? Reverse engineering is when you take a finished product, you try to reconstruct how this came into existence by looking at the components and the like. Now, it says, Histakel b'oraisa uborei alma. God looked into the Torah and he made the world via the Torah, meaning to say, the Torah is the blueprint of the world, whatever that means. So consequently, the Avos were in such a madrega that when they're mistakel and misbonein into the physical reality of the world, they understand how the mitzvos of God were the foundation of that. So there was no text here. It's not that they had a text. It's not that they had a sefer. It's not that they even knew necessarily the particulars of the history. Well, I just said they may have known the things that will happen to Klal Yisrael, but they certainly didn't know their own story. Hashem did not tell them that ahead of time. But it means that looking at the world, they were able to reconstruct the mitzvahs. Now, we do this to a tiny, tiny, tiny little degree. So, for example, there are many things in the Torah that we would understand from our own intuition. For example, it's wrong to kill. It's wrong to steal. We have an instinct. I mean, if you're a normal person, you have an instinct that this is not a good thing to do. Meaning, we intuitively understand. Now, when it comes to shatnez, not wearing woolen linen, wearing tefillin, we wouldn't figure that out on our own. We need Hashem to tell us. The Avos had such a deep sophistication of understanding the world that the same way that intuitively we know you're not supposed to kill, they intuitively know you're not supposed to wear woolen linen. And it comes from histakel v'yoraisa uborei alma, that the world is the way the world is precisely because of the dynamics of all of the mitzvos and averos that are in the Torah. But it was not a textual thing, for sure not. And that is why you don't have the problem of, did the Avos know ahead of time there would be an Akedah or whatever. By the way, I mean, somebody, I mean, I really, I didn't lose my temper, but I got a little impatient because somebody was telling me when Moshe came down from Har Sinai, he brought, I had made a statement, I didn't even think it was controversial, that Moshe brought down the Luchais, but he didn't bring down a Sefer Torah. A Sefer Torah was not written till the last day of Moshe Rabbeinu's life. So he said that, no, he says he brought down everything. So I said, what do you mean he brought down everything? Well, so first I thought he was saying, well, Moshe was told everything. Okay, Moshe could have been told everything. But Bnei Yisrael for sure were not told everything. And I thought that would placate him. He said, no, Moshe Rabbeinu told Bnei Yisrael the whole Torah. I said, what do you mean? Half of the Torah occurs after Matan Torah. Korach, Meraglim. So you're telling me he comes down from Har Sinai and he tells them about Korach and about Meraglim? He says, yeah. So I said, so what's going on? Are they play acting? Korach is just reading a script. Hey, Korach, you stand here, and there's going to be this great visual. The ground's going to open up. That makes no sense. So he said something like, he told to them, but they didn't understand what it meant. I said, what is there not to understand? It says the ground opens up and you get swallowed. So, okay. I mean, I don't want to insult the person, but the point is, that's an absurd position. When we say Moshe Rabbeinu got the Torah at Sinai, that means he got the mitzvos at Sinai. The narratives didn't happen till they happened, and they were not written down till they happened. The story of the Meraglim was not written in a sefer until after the story of the Meraglim happened. So there's a machlokas in the Gemara. Do we say Moshe Rabbeinu wrote it piecemeal, as every event happened, Moshe then wrote it? Or perhaps he didn't even write it at all till the 40th year. That's a machlokas in the Gemara. But the one thing that is 100% certain is he didn't come down from Sinai with a Sefer Torah. That would just be, it would be absurd. It would be crazy. So the same way we say Moshe got b'Sinai, meaning mitzvos, we also mean that the Avos perceived the mitzvos, but not necessarily the connecting narratives. That, yeah.
But if it's in the Torah, would it not be represented in the world and not they would see?
Well, once again, you can see the causal connection without knowing the history of that connection. Meaning, they saw that this thing is this way because of this mitzvah and this avera, and otherwise there would be a kilkel. Now, that doesn't mean, though, they necessarily saw why that was that way. That may depend on inyanim that were not yet given to them, you see. But the notion of physically connecting spiritual cause and effect, that was within their hasaga. By the way, just I guess, even the statement that mitzvos, Moshe got the mitzvos b'Sinai, even that's not true with respect to Bnei Yisrael. You have to, the Netziv writes, and this is a davar pashut really, that you have to differentiate when did Moshe get mitzvos and when did he communicate those mitzvos to Bnei Yisrael. It's very clear Bnei Yisrael are getting mitzvos at different times over 40 years. The whole book of Devarim, Moshe is giving them new mitzvos that they haven't heard before. Didn't we say Moshe got all the mitzvahs in Har Sinai? The answer is yeah. Moshe got all the mitzvahs at Har Sinai. But Hashem told him, for reasons we don't always know, when to reveal the mitzvahs at specific times. If you read the Chumash, it's very clear. Mitzvahs are being unrolled at different times in the 40 years. You see? So that's not a contradiction to everything was given b'Sinai. Everything was given by Hashem to Moshe b'Sinai. And Moshe then communicated them when Hashem told him to communicate. In fact, that's the meaning of the ubiquitous phrase, Vayedaber Hashem el Moshe lemor. Hashem spoke to Moshe to say, meaning, now I'm telling you to reveal this commandment to the people. I'm not giving you a reason why that's so, but it is a davar pashut. If you would take a snapshot of the Dor HaMidbar every day for the 40 years, they weren't doing all the mitzvos all the time. There were times they didn't have certain mitzvos because the mitzvos were not given until later. And that, I don't just mean the mitzvos of Eretz Yisrael. That's for sure they didn't do till, but even the mitzvos that are not totally in Eretz Yisrael. Even something like tefillin. That's a good question. We were given the mitzvah of tefillin by Yetzias Mitzrayim. The only question is that two of the parshiyos of tefillin, Shema v'Hayam Shemaya, were not said until the book of Devarim, which is 40 years later. So what was in the tefillin that the Jewish people wore for the 40 years they were in the desert until the last day of month of Moshe Rabbeinu's life? So some Rishonim actually say those tefillin only had two parshiyos, Kadesh v'Hayaki v'Yacha. Others say Shema v'Hayam Shemaya were Torah Shebal Peh that was written down, etc., even though it was not nichtav until the book of Devarim. A lot of good questions about this. In fact, the Chazon Ish writes, forgive me for digressing, that this explains, the situations where Moshe didn't know the halacha. Moshe didn't know about Pesach Sheni. Moshe didn't know if daughters inherit property, if there's no sons. Moshe Rabbeinu didn't know what the punishment of the wood gatherer is. Moshe Rabbeinu didn't know what the punishment of the Makalel is. Right? Moshe didn't know. He had to ask Hashem. Question, but didn't Hashem give him all the mitzvahs b'Sinai? Pesach Sheni is one of the 613 mitzvahs. Didn't Hashem give him the mitzvah of Pesach Sheni b'Sinai? So what's going on? So some midrashim say Moshe forgot because of whatever it is, he forgot. But the Chazon Ish learns differently. The Chazon Ish learns very, very gavaldik. The Chazon Ish learns, of course Moshe Rabbeinu knew. But since he was not yet authorized to say, he didn't know if he has reshus to paskin based on what Hashem told him, if he was not yet given a giloi to reveal it. And that, the Chazon Ish says, is why Moshe Rabbeinu had to ask Hashem, and Hashem says, you now have my permission to reveal the halacha that you already knew. That's what the Chazon Ish writes. Okay, anything else? Yeah.
Very good quick. The HaRav was telling his Hasidim not to call Mandani an anti-Semite because we're still in Go.
Oh, the modern, the present HaRav, yeah.
We're raising a stronger question about what our Mahalach and Golas should be. Like, should we be trying to fight? Should we be trying to fight anti-Semitism and calling politicians anti-Semites, or should we more be like laying low because we're in Go?
Yeah, but it is a very, very difficult issue. Probably some of you are probably from New York, and it's an amazing thing. It's really a miracle in the negative sense that a guy like Mamdani would get elected in New York City. And what's really very upsetting is there is no doubt whatsoever that there's no way he could have gotten elected without a substantial vote of Jewish voters. You cannot win an election in New York City without Jewish support, and somehow he got it. And indeed, there's all organizations, Jews for Mamdani, And what they like to say is, this is what they like to say, I voted for Mamdani because of my Jewish values. I didn't betray my Jewish values. I fulfilled my Jewish values. But, okay, that's a little politicking. But your question basically is, how does one deal with anti-Semitism or with political decisions that are hurtful to the Jewish community? Do you have demonstrations? Do you have public outcries? Or do you have a low key? So the truth is there are different dayas. But on this prat, I think the Satmar Rebbe's position is actually a mainstream position. I think it was a well understood idea that when a Jew is in Gullus, you're under the power of Esav. And part of your job is to simply grin and bear it, meaning accept it, understand that they're not going to love you, or at least do things in a quiet, indirect way, which doesn't embarrass or humiliate the political leaders, because otherwise things can backfire. Now, the truth of the matter is, some have said that's even appropriate in Eretz Yisrael. We shouldn't have all of these demonstrations. Okay, there so might be a different parsha, but certainly in Chutz La'aretz, I think that was the historical mahalech of Am Yisrael throughout the Middle Ages and even in modern times to keep a relatively low profile. Now, some make the argument, well, America is different because America is democracy and everybody has equal rights and we're not like an oppressed minority. We are American citizens. Why shouldn't we have the right? Well, that's a nice theory. In practice, it happens not to be true because these things just fuel anti-Semitism. I mean, let me give you such a dramatic example of this. And forgive me, this may be the only time I've mentioned him, or maybe I mentioned once before. Have you heard, and I hope you haven't, have you heard of Kanye West? Okay, you don't have to admit. All right, whatever, he's a singer, I don't even know, a rap singer, some singer, whatever it is. And he had like multi-million dollar endorsement contracts for advertisements. And he made some statement about how Jews control the economy and they control billions of dollars. And as a result, he lost, his contracts were terminated. He lost several $billion of endorsements. Now, if you're Kanye West or if you're an anti-Semite, what do you say there? I made an accusation that Jews control billions of dollars, and as a result, I lost billions of dollars because of that statement. You know, you think you're fighting anti-Semitism. Oh, so great, we got rid of Kanye West. Yeah, that's really great. What you've done is you've confirmed 100% exactly what he said. Right? So you have to think about this. You know, anti-Semites saying, Jews have all the power, Jews control the media, Jews control the banks. And then we fight back by using economic power. You're not really helping Klal Yisrael. You might be hurting Klal Yisrael. So one has to be very careful that a lower profile might sometimes be a much more sensible way to go. The Kli Yakar actually says, the Kli Yakar was the Rav of Prague in the 1500s. I'm sure you've heard or learned the beautiful parish of the Kli Yakar al Torah. Just for a little information, the Kli Yakar was actually a Talmud of the Maharal of Prague. And he was the successor. The Rav of Prague before the Kli Yakar was Maharal, and the Kli Yakar took over after the Maharal died, and he was a Talmud of the Maharal. So on the pasuk, when it says Penu lechem tzfona, when Hashem said, when we're crossing into Eretz Yisrael, we should avoid the land of the Edomites and we should go north. It's a pasuk. The Kli Yakar says, B'derech drush, that Edom is not just Esav. Edom is our whole confrontation with Goyim. And Safan, which means north, can also mean hide and conceal yourself. Don't confront Edom. Kind of conceal yourself. Just don't make a big deal about a lot of things. So people can argue with this. I mean, Alan Dershowitz is certainly going to say, oh, well, that's totally wrong. But I think what the Satmar Rebbe said has a lot of support in our Messiah. It's not just the Satmar thing. Okay? Yeah.
So there's an issue of using a Shul or a base Midrash as a shortcut.
I mean, using a shul for a shortcut?
That also applies to the base Midrash? And I guess the general question is, like, let's say if we use this back door and we go downstairs, we want to get to the main base, you would have to cross, I guess, the derek Bet Midrash. Is that allowed to do, or does one spend time in there, maybe learn or say a pasuk?
Yeah. So this is the halacha that says you're not allowed to use a base Knesset, a shul, as a shortcut. So if I wanted to go from here to there, I have to walk around and not use it as a shortcut. So the question becomes, is that applies only to a base Knesset, which is a place that all you do is daven? Or does it also apply to a base Midrash, which is a place where you learn? Because in some ways, although a base Midrash on some level has a higher level of holiness because it's both Torah and davening, we also find there are certain leniencies in a base Midrash. You're not allowed to eat in a base Knesset. You are allowed to eat in a base Midrash because of Bittul Torah. So your question becomes, would I therefore allow shortcuts? So the answer is, for shortcuts, it's the same. So the Yisr of Kapandria, which is shortcut, applies to a base Midrash as well. And the Pashut Eitzah is, though, that you sit down, even just for a minute, and you do some learning or say a kapitel of Tehillim, and then you're allowed to keep on going. Now, in your particular question, there's another tzad to be makel, and the other tzad to be makel is, if I'm using the shul as a shortcut to get to shul, meaning I'm doing it to get to the main base Midrash, so that b'chlal might be mutter anyway, because that's not a kapandria for its tzarech chol, that's a kapandria for its tzarech mitzvah. But I would still recommend it would be better to sit down and learn something.
What's the halachic status of the Kotel Ma'aravi? Especially like there's the lower part and then there's the upper part. The lower part people down and then the upper part.
No, just to speak. Just the mic.
No, okay. Yeah. So again, the Kotel Ma'aravi, the Western Wall, used to be called the Wailing Wall. We paskin more or less, although there are machlokim, the halacha is fairly definite. This is not the wall of the Bet HaMikdash for sure, and it's not even the wall of the courtyard of the Bet HaMikdash, which is the Azara. It is simply the outer wall of the Temple Mount. So as a result, immediately beyond the Kotel is not the camp of the divine presence, it's not the Kedusha Shechlach Neshlina, it is the camp of the Levium. And that has implications regarding whether a Tamei Meis could enter there. I don't want to get into that. I got into trouble a few weeks ago with that. But it's indisputable, pretty much, that the Kotel is the Kotel of the HaRav. Now, because it is the Kotel of the HaRav, it really makes no difference if it is the upper level or the lower level, because all that means is, over the many centuries, the ground level has been raised, meaning the lower level is the original wall at the time of Herod, who constructed that Kotel. So as a result, there is no nafkamina in Kedusha. The only chumras that people have, some people are machmir, that they don't insert their fingers into the crevices of the wall, because there is a fear that the crevices are considered to already be entering the HaRav. Now the truth is, since there really is no problem with them even entering the HaRav, at least at that particular level, there shouldn't be any problem. But those who are absolutely machmir, that they would never enter any part of the HaRav, so some have a chumrah on top of that they won't even insert their fingers into the cracks in the wall, and that would even mean they wouldn't put a note in and the like. But as far as I know, I don't know any nafkamina between the upper level and the lower level.
I'm saying the upper level I'm saying where people daven now, and then there's like, I guess further out, there's like where people talk. I mean, they created two levels for the davening part, and then the part where people like schmooze.
You're talking about the Kotel Plaza?
Yeah, the plaza, yeah.
Oh, okay. So that's a separate issue. So forget about the holiness of the temple. You're simply dealing with the point of base Knesset, meaning it happens to be that the Kotel area has been designated as a place of prayer. So at a minimum, it has Kedushas base Knesset. And Kedushas base Knesset, you're not allowed to have Sicha B'Tela, although people don't keep that very well. But So at a minimum, the kaisel would have that. Under those circumstances, the part where the regular minyanim are not held would not have any kedusha space knesses. There would be no problem with talking. But spiritually, you'd have to recognize that you're in such proximity to the HaRav that one should be a little more serious. But technically, there is no isser in the outer level to have sicha b'tela. I mean, think about this. In the time when there was a Bet HaMikdash, obviously, parts of Yerushalayim are going to be next to the Temple Mount. And people conducted business, people conducted schmoozing. I mean, they didn't, the Temple Mount was the boundary. So until you got to the Temple Mount, you were allowed to do whatever you were doing. Okay, yeah.
With the Rashi's parish on Chumash and Rashi's parish on Gemara, we know with Rashi's parish on Gemara, sometimes he's adding missing words that the preserved Masorah. Some words were not included in the Gemaras that were implied, and Rashi adds those in. How would we know when Rashi puts those in? And also, Rashi on Chumash, is Rashi's parish on Chumash always shot in the literal sense? Even with the Midrashim, I have heard opinions that is so.
Yeah, so first of all, let me talk about the second question first. Rashi's parish on Chumash. Now, if you study Rashi on Chumash, you know that the vast majority of Rashi's comments on Chumash is really an anthology of statements from the Gemara and from Midrashim, both the Agadic Midrashim, like the Medrash Rabbah and Tanchuma, and the halachic Midrashim, like the Sifra, the Sifri, and the Mechilta. So one might say, so what's so great about Rashi? Isn't Rashi just quoting Gemaras and Midrashim? Well, you have to understand that obviously Rashi is not quoting every Medrash. Otherwise, Rashi's commentary would be 10 times bigger. And who would need it if we have Midrashim? So the very fact that Rashi chose which Midrashim to incorporate itself was a tremendous, tremendous job. And Rashi says over and over again, Rashi says many, many places in his Parish on Chumash, that there are many Midrashim here, but I have chosen the Midrashim that represent the Pashut Pshat, the simple, straightforward meaning of the Pasuk. So Rashi himself self-identifies his mission as what is called Pshuto Shel Mikra. Now, what is Pshat in Pshat is not so simple. What exactly do we mean by Pashut Pshat? Right? What does that mean? Do we mean literal? No, we don't mean literal because Rashi is often not going to be literal. But we mean an explanation of the pasuk that fits the pasuk in its overall context. See, sometimes Midrashim will give you a beautiful interpretation, but it doesn't connect to the pasuk before and the pasuk after and the pasuk after that. So one of the characteristics of Pshuto Shel Mikra is you locate a pasuk in context. So it's connected to the overall structure. And that was very important to Rashi. Also, pshat means it is faithful to the diktuk of the pasuk, the grammar, the syntax, the word order, as opposed to just taking a word out of context and making a drasha. So in that sense, Rashi tries to be very faithful to pshat. However, commentaries have pointed out that although this is a guiding principle in Rashi, it is not the only guiding principle in Rashi. Rashi has some other principles that he was juggling with as well. One of the principles is that sometimes if a teaching of Chazal is a fundamental hashkafa in Yiddishkeit, Rashi will go with that important lesson even if it departs a little bit from Pshat, because it is so important for a Jewish person to be aware of. So Rashi did look at Pshat as a very, very major point, but he also looked at Yesodos in Hashkafa as being fundamental. And in halacha as well, Rashi tries to explain psukim according to the way Chazal understood it halachically, so there shouldn't be a divergence between halacha and pshat. So I would have to say that pshuto shel mikra is a very, very important principle in Rashi, but it is not the only principle that Rashi Rashi uses. Now, Rashi in Gemara, when you say Rashi adds words, so I'm not sure what you mean. There are two different types of additions that Rashi will make. Sometimes he adds words as part of his commentary where he's just connecting question, answer, etc. Other times, Rashi is correcting a girsa. Rashi is giving you a text because there were different texts of the Gemara. Now, sometimes you're not going to get the point because Rashi's text was already incorporated by the printers. So you don't always know what Rashi is doing, but Rashi will often be correcting a faulty text that was different than the one that we have now. So I don't know what you mean. Sometimes Rashi is giving you connecting phrases. Other times Rashi is giving you a girsa. And it'll say Hachi Garsinan and the like. Yeah.
I was told in regards to Gemara that when the Gemara was written, it was written as a way to preserve memory. So a lot of things in there a lot of the writing is more esoteric, as in you have to have a Masorah to know what is going on under the dot. And Rashi helps us by reminding us of even more things that may have been lost had there not have been a commentary.
No, I agree that's 100% correct. In other words, but that would suggest that he wasn't correcting a girsa, he was just giving you a Masorah as to how to understand the very enigmatic, cryptic words in the Gemara itself. Yeah, 100% right. I mean, people don't appreciate it. People sometimes look at Art Scroll and they say, well, I don't need Rashi. Art Scroll tells me everything. Where did Art Scroll get it from? I mean, one does not realize what Gemara would be like without, of course we have many Rishonim, but nothing replaces Rashi. One does not realize what the Talmud would be like had we not had the benefit of Rashi. It would have been incomprehensible. Rabbeinu Tam said that without Rashi's Perush on Gemara, the Talmud Bavli would have been lost. So, a person learns, you actually develop a tremendous, I would say, love and affection for Rashi, because he really holds your hands, and his style is so beautiful, concise, short, brief, very, very clear, extremely clear. And it's a tremendous gift. He didn't die that old. He died at 68 or 69. He did not even reach the age of 70. And look at what he did. The Perush on Gemara, the Perush on Chumash, also on all of Tanakh, but mainly Chumash is the greatest one. Rashi was also the Paisek of the generation. Rashi has many, many psukim, many shelos utshuvos. So just an amazing thing, yeah.
Isn't there also another issue? If a person doesn't take a Rashi literally or seriously, whatever, you could lose the Masorah as well. Meaning Rashi gives the correct shot in line with the Masorah on
So, are you referring to the Torah or to the Gemara? No.
I'd say with Chumash, for example, he doesn't treat Rashi like a baseline. He loses the Masorah on pattern.
So that I think is a more controversial proposition. I mean, you might be thinking about, there's a series of Sfarim that came out called Pshuto Shel Mikra. And this was the successor to an earlier set that's called Rashi, what is it, the Blue Books, that's a commentary on Rashi? Rashi Kipshuta. So Rashi Kipshuta is Rashi with the Perush on Rashi. And Gavaldik, Haskamos, everybody loved it. They then came out with a second edition of the same book, but they added a new compartment called Pshuto Shel Mikra, which gave Pashut Pshat based on other Meforshim, not Rashi. So they still have Rashi Kipshuto, they still have it, and they added Pshuto Shel Mikra. So you'd figure, Baruch Hashem, they added a very nice feature. But this erupted into I think the controversy died down by now, but last year or 2 years ago, it was a big, big controversy. Some people wanted to put the book in Cherem. Oh, you're calling something Pshuto Shel Mikra, which is not Rashi? Rashi is not Pshuto Shel Mikra anymore. You're violating the Messiah. Even though every single thing was based on other Mefarshim, Ramban, Ibn Ezra, Nitziv. It wasn't like a modern Bible critics, whatever it is. So some were actually saying exactly what you're saying, that if you don't take Rashi as the baseline pshat, he says there's like a kafira, or you're losing the Messiah, or you're disconnecting yourself. Okay, there is such a shita. I think it's an overstated shita. I think that one has to have extreme reverence for Rashi, and that has to be your foundation. But that doesn't mean you can't consider other meforshim.
I wasn't saying that that you can consider Mepharshim. I was saying there's a concern about loss of the Torah if Rashi is treated secondary.
I don't know. I think that may be more of a problem in Gemara than in Chumash. I think that in Chumash already. I mean, I know people. Not that I don't do this myself, but they say when they want to know real Pashut Pshat, they learn the Hamikdash of the Nitziv. Okay, that's a 19th century parish, a parish of the Nitziv. They consider that to be more Pashut Pshat. Rashi is very heavy in Midrashim. But the one thing that you do lose when you don't focus on Rashi is you're losing the kesher between Torah Shebaal Peh and Torah Shebechsab, because Rashi created a tremendous bridge with all of the chazals that Rashi brought. It's been pointed out that many, many, many famous chazals are famous not from their source in chazal, but they're famous from the fact that Rashi quotes them. For example, with Avram Avinu, Emor Ma'at, Perkei Avos says, Emor Ma'at v'yasei harbe. Say very little and do more than you say. Because Avram says to the Malachim, I'm only going to give you this little thing, and he goes on and does a lot. So it's a famous, Rashi brings the point, Emor Ma'at v'yasei harbe. Now, the truth is, that is in Perkei Avos. But how do people know it? People know it from Rashi, because the Rashi is taught from the time kids are in first grade or second grade, whatever it is. So the truth is, Rashi brought, and you can give 100 of these, Rashi brought many, many, many Mamori Chazal, even to people who didn't learn Gemara and didn't learn Mishnah and don't really know the original sources. He brought it to the people. So in that sense, that itself is a Messiah, that certain things became very part of Klal Yisrael's consciousness because Rashi put them in his parish. And that's part of the Ruach HaKodesh of Rashi. Okay, one more question if anyone has. Yeah.
In Soldier, we're now in the section of birkat kohanim, and we're looking at the halachas, and it seems like there's a lot of different ways that people could, I guess, do the gesture when the Kohen is, when the Kohen is blessing the kegillah. The question is there any significance to each of the gestures? I think the Shul says you should make 5 spaces or 5 windows. Like, where does that come from? What's special about that?
Yeah. So the notion of the 5 windows, all of this is Kabbalah, meaning to say the following. As far as the Gemara is concerned, the din of the Gemara, the only requirement is Kohanim put out their hands. In the Bet HaMikdash, Kohanim would actually raise their hands above their heads, except for the Kohen Gadol, who could not raise his hand above the sitz that had the Shem HaMeforish. But there's no notion of openings or windows. So all of this is Kabbalah. So Memela, it's not Ma'akev. Even if a Kohen does not spread his fingers, it's totally okay. But the basis of the Mechaber's, Rav Yosef Karo was a Mekubal himself, the basis of the 5 openings is from the Pasuk in Shir HaShirim that Hashem is Meitzitz min hacharakim. That means he gazes at us between the windows, like a mother watching her children play in the yard from the windows. Now, hacharakim, hey, meaning the Shekhinah protects us through the 5 windows. And the Arizal says that refers to the 5 openings in the hands of the Kohanim that become the conduit for divine bracha. So all of the different configurations are totally Kabbalistic. They are not part of the, they're not ma'akev birkas kohanim. They're not halachically required, but l'chatzchila, it's a proper thing to do. Okay, Ovi, well, have a good day.
Thank you for listening to this Awesome production. To find out more and to partner in our mission, please visit ohr.edu.